just so that we can keep track of these minutes and things. So the Orleans County Conservation District worked with the Shadow Lake Association to source grant funds to do this Lake Watershed Action Plan, which is what we call phase one. So if anybody has seen on any of the materials for this work, we call it phase one. And really what that means is DEC has guidance on what a Lake Watershed Action Plan is. And for this particular project, the grant amount that DEC was offering wasn't going to be enough. And so we ended up proposing a phase one, which means that there aren't 30% designs for identified projects, but there are still a list of identified projects. And why we felt like that was a good proposal is because there's a lot of existing funding sources for those 30% designs and support to move those projects forward. So we didn't feel that the watershed and the Lake Association was going to miss out on any opportunities there. So that's what the phase one part of the plan is. So let's see, I'm going to just ask you all to remain muted so that we don't have any distractions. If anybody is new to Teams, up on the top, I guess you call it a ribbon, you can see there's a button for the chat. There's a button to see who else is in the meeting with you. You can raise your hand if you have a question. You can send a reaction, which is like a little clapping or whatever. And then you can change your view. And then your camera and your mic buttons are up at the top there. So that's just a little bit of like meeting logistics for you. And so when we get to the sections of our agenda where we have questions and answers, that's where I'd ask for you to use the raise hand so that we can kind of keep things efficient so that people aren't trying to talk over each other. So if you do have a question during those sections of the agenda, just use the raise your hand and I'll call on you and we'll try to address your questions that way. Let's see. So I think I'm just gonna do the share the screen. And we'll see how it goes without actually being able to see you all, but I need to be able to share my agenda or my presentation. So, oh, actually, let's see. Okay. Oh, great. I figured out that I can actually see you. So can everybody see my presentation?
We see a copy of Teams of your presentation.
Your gallery view's in the way.
Oh, you can actually see the gallery.
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Hold on. Oh, geez, not that. Okay, people. There we go. Okay. So I already explained this slide here, but just to say again that this is a meeting to go over our final report. And our final report is really focused on, and this meeting is really focused on kind of a high-level overview, a synthesis of the priorities that came out of the assessments and the recommendations that are in the plan and the outcomes of the plan. I think a lot of the work that we try to do in general with the Conservation District and certainly with this plan here is to sort of implore people to take action and to identify ways that, you know, they can in their everyday lives, you know, take up some of the work that has been presented and identified. So we're going to spend some time to kind of implore you to do that. So, okay. So now I'm just going to hand it over to Jen quick, Jen Andrews, the president of the Lake Association, to share kind of where we've been and kind of what led us to do this Lake Watershed Action Plan. Jen, are you able to unmute? Sorry. Or?
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're pretty faint.
Oh, well, let me get closer to my iPad and maybe turn up my volume.
Okay. I can hear you better now as you sort of lean in.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrews, president of the Shadow Lake Association. Welcome to everybody here today, and probably some who will be reviewing the recording a little bit later. The slide that we're looking at shows Shadow Lake's score, what's called a scorecard. I'm sure some of you have already looked at this, and as you can see, there's a circle up in the upper right-hand corner, and the circle has quadrants in it. And the top one is the water quality trend section. And as you can see in the lower left-hand corner, there's a blue-green graph. And it shows about 30 years of lay monitoring and LaRosa testing that Shadow Lake volunteers have done. And it shows that Shadow is experiencing increasing phosphorus concentrations. That's one reason that we have embarked on this important adventure. The shoreland condition is the second quadrant on the right on that circle. That is also in red. And that means that our shoreline has been manipulated by humans. We have a dam that's not functioning at full capacity. Our lake is being impacted by algae and sediment and runoff from erosion, which contributes more and more nutrient loading. So therefore, Vermont DEC Basin 17 lists Shadow as a priority watershed. The third quadrant is blue, and I just wanted to do a little shout out to everybody who helped deal with the milfoil in Shadow Lake. That's been eradicated at this point. There's a huge effort by Shadow Lake Association and also state scientists. The fourth quadrant is showing that mercury is in the water, which is from airborne particles, and that is a situation which is throughout the state. This is why we're here, right? To learn from the collected data and prioritize actions that will try and mitigate the things that we actually are able to. Sarah?
Perfect. Thank you. So quickly, our agenda for today. Jen just sort of welcomed us, introduced the Lake Association. Then I'm just going to give an overview of what a Lake Watershed Action Plan is and what the process is, or what our outcomes are. And then we'll hear mostly today from Carrie from the Watershed Consulting, who is the consulting organization that we hired to do this work, and she's the one who's done such a great job, and we're so grateful for the work that she's done. She's been great to work with. So she's going to share the report, and then at that point we'll have some question and answer time. And then at the end, I do have a survey that I would love for you all to fill out. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat toward the end, and then we can talk about some next steps and hear kind of a closing from Jen. So a Lake Watershed Action Plan is an assessment and planning tool that identifies the greatest threats, stressors, and conditions to a particular lake ecosystem. And this includes stormwater runoff, sedimentation and nutrients, erosion, invasive species, and habitat loss. Generally, the assessment and planning work, of course, also, as I've said already, includes a significant amount of community engagement because, as we all know, we don't want this to be a tool that sits on a shelf. So I really try to, work hard to build relationships and to build community awareness and sort of include educational components to this work as well so that we can have some local buy-in. Generally, this process is a 2-year process. And so, Jen, we secured this grant. Let's see, it's 2024, 2022, I suppose. So we've been at it for a little while. And we are, in the end, kind of looking to prioritize areas of work within the watershed that would help improve water quality. And again, that largely is going to be driven by community input and buy-in on that prioritization. And then the last piece is what we're doing today, which is the final report. Okay, see, I was right. Oops. How do I go back? Oh boy. How do I go back? I don't know how to go back. There we go. It was 2022. So we started the process actually in January of 2022, and then we started to work more in earnest with Carrie at Watershed Consulting and Jen on doing a desktop review of the watershed conditions and resources. We hosted a kickoff meeting, which I think you were there, Mike, at the town office, just to sort of, orient people to our intentions and what the rollout would look like. Carrie conducted assessments for about a year, which looked like a variety of sort of on the ground work, and then also doing some aerial drone flights, and then also doing a shoreland assessment, getting in a boat with Lake Association members and looking at the shoreland from the lake. In last August, we had a public meeting where we engaged community members to give us some input on what they felt were the priorities based on the assessments that Jen presented. And so we gathered input, and that kind of fed into how we prioritized some of the outcomes. And then now we are looking at doing the final report. So it shouldn't say January there, actually, but and then just kind of a high-level overview beyond the report, some general outcomes is that we've had 6 internal stakeholder meetings. And so throughout this process, we've engaged with, town folks, Lake Association folks, and DEC staff, lake staff, wetland staff, river staff, so that, it wasn't just happening in a vacuum with the Conservation District, Watershed Consulting, and Jen. So we really, again, wanted to make sure that the stakeholders were involved all along the way so that we had a good, viable plan at the end. And then our community engagement piece, we did, as I've already said, hosted 3 public meetings. We also secured funds from the town to host workshops through the ARPA funds, and we've had I forget the total numbers. I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40 attendees at those workshops, which was great. We also have grant funds to work with local contractors who are doing landscape work, dirt moving work, yellow machine work in Orleans County on lake shores to access the DEC lake shoreland erosion control certification course. And so that definitely hopefully will have some positive impacts for Shadow Lake. We did 3 press releases, and then we did 3 lake restoration signs at the lake kiosks, 1 at Shadow, 1 at Parker, and then 1 down at Daniels. And you can kind of see that's what my blue circle is down here. That's the little sign that we created. That's the size that Fish and Wildlife would let us have. So just again, trying to raise awareness and build some buy-in. Some additional outcomes more related to the projects. And again, Carrie's going to go over this more, but 52 identified projects, 25 high priority projects. We were able to do some lake assessments. We are actually actively looking to do some projects, which Mike, I think I showed you one of those already, right down at the Dudley site there. And then, of course, 1 final report. So now this is, oopsies, this is where you guys just got a little sneak peek. This is where I'm going to hand it off to Carrie and let Carrie share her screen.
Okay, great, thanks. Just bear with me while I share. Can you see that?
It's coming up. There it is. I see it.
Okay. So like Sarah, I also can't see what anyone is doing in the meeting. So maybe Sarah could be in charge of letting me know if anyone has any interjections.
Sounds good.
Great. Okay, so that was a great intro. Thanks very much. So I'm just going to start out with sort of a high-level overview of the Lake Watershed Action Plan Phase 1 for Shadow Lake. Sarah went over some of this already, but I just wanted to lay out the tasks that were completed. So we had first our data review with our stakeholder input meeting that we saw the photo of. Then a desktop assessment to really dig into that data and identify potential areas for practices and issues within the
Carrie,
watershed.
excuse me, this is Andres.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I just didn't know, you can't see, the presentation's not started. I didn't know if that was intentional or not.
No. Okay. Hold
Yeah,
on.
I think we're just looking at this.
Okay, it started on my screen, but
Yeah.
maybe I shared the wrong thing. Hold on. I don't generally use Teams, so I'm a newbie with this platform. Is that better?
That's good. We're looking at the watershed, Shadow Lake.
Oh, yeah.
LWAP.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks for letting me know.
Yep.
Right. So desktop assessment and identifying potential opportunities and potential issues that would impact water quality. Then the field assessments, which included assessments on the lakeshore from the boat, walking around and driving around within the watershed, looking at roads. We did also complete a couple of flights with our drone, and that was primarily to look at areas that were pretty heavily forested that were not easily accessible, particularly in south of the lake in that area. And then also another flight we did after that big storm in July of last year to take a look at the flooding and sedimentation in the lake that resulted after that big storm. We then completed a prioritization of the project recommendations and then held that other public meeting in August of last year. And then we completed 30 summary sheets that were based on the stakeholder input at that public meeting. And I'll get into what those look like later in the presentation. And completed lake-wise assessments at 5 properties along Shadow Lake. And then we have completed the final plan document, which really includes everything that occurred in the project. But accompanying that, we also have a story map, which is an online resource that's meant to be a little bit more user-friendly for people who don't want to read through a 50-page document that's has some pretty technical language in it. And that story map has interactive maps, so you can zoom around in the watershed and take a look at any areas of interest to you. So when we look at a watershed, for these Lake Watershed Action Plans, we focus on 3 main sectors. So those are our transportation, so our roads, driveways, and trails, our shorelands, and our streams. And so each of those can contribute sediment and nutrients to the lake, which then can lead to those increasing phosphorus levels that Jen talked about and increased sedimentation in the lake. So I'm just going to give some kind of takeaways from what those assessments told us about the watershed. So the road sector had the most projects identified, and that again does include things like driveways, private roads, and public roads. And the most common issues were things like unstable road shoulders, so just loose material, erodible and unstable ditches, lack of adequate cross drainage, and that could be a missing culvert, a culvert that wasn't quite big enough, or one that was clogged with sediment. Grading that wasn't doing the job that it's supposed to, which is to get the water off of the road as quickly as possible to prevent erosion. Grader berms, so that's piles of sediment that can build up on the edges of the roads and again, keep the water on the road, which is not what we want. And then really a direct connection of the roads to the water. So sort of acting as a funnel for sediment into the lake. For the shoreline sector, we had a significant number of projects identified there too, 39% of the projects. And the most common issues were things like lack of vegetated buffers, shoreline erosion, and retaining walls. So that's something I'll talk a little bit more about when we get to that specific section. And then the stream sector, which we have 12% of the projects. And for this, because it was that phase 1 Lake Watershed Action Plan, this plan didn't really focus too much on the streams. So we didn't do full stream walks, which is a part of a full Lake Watershed Action Plan. So the information that we have for the streams was collected from our other field assessments and that drone imagery that we collected. However, we did identify some common issues such as lack of floodplain access. So that's an area where when it rains a lot and the stream floods up, it doesn't really have a place to go and spread out and slow down. Lack of vegetated riparian buffers, and again, unmanaged stormwater input, this time into the streams. And so what that can do is make the water, when it rains, reach the stream a lot faster and in greater volumes than you would get in an area that's more heavily vegetated or the stormwater is managed. And so what that does is make the streams have more erosive capacity. So that means they're more likely to erode the stream banks and carry sediment down to the lake. So I'm now going to dive a little bit into each of those sectors. And first, I just wanted to lay out some sort of key concepts related to stormwater. So when we think about stormwater in a natural vegetated area, generally it's going to be taken up by the trees and the vegetation and pass over the ground pretty slowly, and it's going to be spread out. It's not going to be super concentrated. And the idea with managing stormwater is to sort of try to recreate that, but within our developed environment. So the concepts that we want to think about are slowing that water down, spreading it out, letting it sink into the ground, and filtering it and keeping it clean. So how does that relate to roadways? Well, the first thing is for unpaved roadways and driveways, we really want to get the water off of the road or driveway as quickly as possible. So that way it's not running down the road and picking up material as the water goes and starts traveling faster, and you have more water on the road. So grading is a great tool that we can use to make sure that the water leaves the road and doesn't pick up that sediment. So this is just a diagram showing sort of a common occurrence that you might find. So you have a road, and then you may have ditches on the side of the road. And those ditches can take that water where it's not going to flood anyone out or anything, and essentially put it into a stream. And if you have a nice stable ditch and a road that's well graded, that's not usually a problem. But in cases where you are actually picking up a lot of sediment and nutrients, that can be a pretty big problem. So your stream or your where your culvert is draining can have pretty negative water quality impacts. However, with some fairly simple management strategies, such as disconnecting those areas where you can with things like turnouts, or adding some stabilization within those ditches, keeping the roads well graded and crowned, you can really prevent a lot of sediment from reaching our surface waters and maintaining good water quality, even with having a road be constructed over a stream. So how does that relate to our watershed? So that directly relates to some of the main issues that were observed, things like unstable ditches, the slopes of the ditches where they connect to the road being pretty unstable and uncompacted. So the sediment is just easier to transport when it rains. Culverts that are clogged or undersized or not there. Grading that either through lack of frequency or another reason, such as leaving grader berms on the side of the road, doesn't get the water off of the road like we'd like to see. And then there's also ATV use that can cause erosion, particularly when that is around surface waters, including wetlands. So within the roadway sector, there were 40 projects identified, which is what I am showing on this map here. And the types of projects that were identified are things like slowing down and filtering out that stormwater with a series of best management practices, improving grading, and stabilizing ditches, and improving the culverts. So just some photos of some of the things that I was just talking about to hopefully give a better indication of what that looks like on the ground. So we have some unstable ditches. You can just see that the material is pretty loose, and some of these ditches have been filled up with sediment and just need to be cleaned out and stabilized. We have a few cases where you can kind of see in the lower right here, we have a culvert that's pretty well clogged, the upper right as well. We have some ditches that have a lot of sediment in them. And in these areas, this is something that needs to be maintained quite regularly, or this occurs pretty much everywhere where we have this type of scenario. The top left here, I'm just showing an area where water has run over the road, and that's because there isn't any sort of cross drainage there. And that was in that July storm, so that was a pretty extreme event there. And a few more examples of grading and grader berms. So the grader berms are these piles of sediment on the side of the road that prevent the water from getting into the ditches. And then we have some driveways where we have some low points that just, this is essentially erode the sediment there of the driveway because it's not able to shed off. Just like on the roads, it's the same concept on driveways. And this top left one was again after that big July storm, but it just shows the importance of really maintaining and making sure that these roadways are resilient to those larger storms. Otherwise, you can get some pretty significant damage And unfortunately, with climate change, it's pretty likely that those types of storms are going to become more frequent. So now we're going to jump over to shoreland issues. So this is just a graphic showing some of the issues that can occur with living on the shoreland and having development on the shoreland. So some of the things I wanted to point out are things like unmanaged runoff coming from upland of the developed properties on the shoreland. So those can concentrate water and cause erosion down to the lake shore. A lack of a robust native vegetated buffer, which is a really important thing, particularly at Shadow Lake, because if folks are aware of the high water levels due to the dam that isn't functioning as it was designed. So the water level is fairly high, and that higher water level can increase that shoreland erosion. However, having a nice, robust vegetated buffer can help to mitigate the impacts of that. And of course, having bare or eroding soil is a direct input of sediment potentially to the lake. So in terms of what we looked at on the shoreline, we again did this from a boat and identified issues along the lake. And the idea here was to identify areas that had sort of the same characteristics. So whether that is a positive thing, such as being well vegetated, or a less positive thing, such as lacking a vegetated shoreland, those were grouped into segments. So each of those segments could be scored individually and could be targeted for outreach and education about the types of issues that they were potentially experiencing, and hopefully willing to correct. So there were 53 segments along the entirety of the lakeshore. And again, hopefully those can be used to prioritize outreach and to prioritize lake-wise assessments. And if you don't know what those are, I will get to that shortly. So each of those was ranked, and this is what the shoreline assessments overview looks like around the lake. So unsurprisingly, the more developed areas have these closer to red colors, which are an indication of potential negative water quality implications, whereas the more vegetated areas have a lower score in these assessments, which indicates a more stable shoreline. So what were the types of issues that we identified? Primarily, like I mentioned a few times already, a lack of a robust native buffer. And again, when we don't have that, that can really decrease the stability of shoreline. And just a note is that even though, yes, these are green, they are just turf grass, and turf grass really has very shallow roots. And I keep saying a robust native vegetated buffer because those native species really have nice deep roots that hold the soil in place. So this is a graphic from the Vermont Bioengineering Manual. And this is showing how deep the roots are of various plants. So on the left side of this depth gauge here, we have turf grass, which you may not even be able to see how deep the roots are because they're quite shallow. Whereas when we look on the right side of that depth line, we can see a lot of other native plants that have much deeper roots, or roots that spread out a lot more. And those types of roots are really good at holding the soil in place. So just a few examples of bare soil and erosion. And then we're going to jump over to the stream sector. And just a little note about sort of what the goal for with healthy streams is. So again, robust vegetated riparian buffers, stable banks, streams that transport water and sediment, but not in excess. So our streams are in what is known as a state of dynamic equilibrium. So that means that when they're healthy, they're in balance where they can transport some sediment, but in healthy quantities, and not having these huge influxes of nutrients and into the lake. And a big piece of that is the inputs of stormwater into our streams. So when we have unmanaged stormwater going into the streams in greater volumes and in much faster than you would in a natural environment, they can really transport significant pollutant loads that they wouldn't do in a less developed area. And also note that any stream culverts need to be large enough so that they aren't restricting flows, because that can actually lead to more scour and erosion. If you think about putting your thumb over a hose, that's sort of what happens when our streams are restricted by culverts that are too small. So the general issues that were observed were some unstable stream banks, some scour and erosion, particularly near some stream culverts, lack of a robust vegetated riparian buffer, and unfiltered or unmanaged stormwater inputs into the streams. So there were 17 projects identified, 5 of which were designated as high priority. And the types of projects included floodplain restoration. So that's allowing the streams to flood up into an area where it's safe to do so, and allow that water to slow down and some of that sediment to filter out. And then increasing buffering and stabilization and slowing and filtering stormwater before it gets to the streams. So just a few examples of areas where there were some erosion and lack of buffers identified. And a few more examples where there could be some improvements made that are fairly straightforward that would have a positive impact on stream and lake health. So back in our August 2023 meeting, we had a survey that was filled out by all of the attendees, and we wanted to gauge the stakeholder feedback on the types of projects that they wanted to see highlighted in the plan. And this table on the left side summarizes that survey that was completed. So each of those categories are what folks voted for, and they let us know what percentage of the projects they wanted to see under each of those categories. So things like public roads and public access areas, private lake shores, private driveways, and then our lake shore, so our stream sector as well. So we, on the right side, we have the number of projects that were identified in each of those categories for a total of 30 projects, and that was the number set out at the beginning of the project. So that was the goal. And overall, we have 13 in that public roads and public access areas, 8 in the lake shores, 5 driveways and 4 stream projects. So that's a total of 30 of these summary sheets. And the goal of these summary sheets, which we have an example of one on the right here, is to really lay out all of the key information about each of these projects, including the location, a description of what is recommended, a description of the site itself, any feasibility issues, and ranking information. So, how did this project rank in terms of the other ones within the sector? So, and then we also have the project rank at the top. So we have a total of 30 of these sheets with all of the associated information. And these are a great way to communicate the project because it also lays out the location and provides a photo of the site as well as all of the other pertinent information. So in all, we have this map that shows us our priority projects. In each one of these locations, I mentioned the story map at the beginning. You could, if you were so inclined, explore that story map, and each one of these points you can click on and learn more about each one of those individual projects. And I just wanted to show one example. So this site was probably pretty familiar to everyone, the Fish and Wildlife Parking Area. This is a public area that's quite high visibility for the watershed. And you can see in this photo that was taken from our drone, there's quite a bit of sediment that is being transported into the lake and washed overland here. And here are just some visualizations. So the top here, the red arrows are showing how the water can flow over this area and transport that sediment into the lake. And here, it would be fairly straightforward to be able to vegetate this area so that when the water is flowing over the boat launch, it's flowing to a nice, robust vegetated area as opposed to a more bare area with a lot of loose sediment that could be washed into the lake. And I did want to highlight, yeah.
Mary, we
Yes.
don't, this is Sarah Gluckman. We don't own the fishing access, the state does. And in your
Right.
report, you suggested it might be an easy project for the Shadow Lake Association. But shouldn't there be some responsibility for the state to upgrade that area to prevent erosion?
Yes, definitely. Yes, I'm sorry if it sounded like I thought you guys owned it. Really, the idea there is public access areas, should be and often are much more low-hanging fruit, if you will. So they're generally easier to get folks on board with doing some projects like that. And the Shadow Lake Association and other folks are, in a good position to work with Fish and Wildlife to implement projects like that.
Okay.
So yeah, I just wanted to highlight some local best management practices that are already in place and in action at the public beach. So there are on the top right, we have a water bar that's directing stormwater into a bioretention area. And then we have a vegetated area along the road to capture stormwater. And then we have some great work that's already been done by the town to replace culverts and stabilize drainages And I did also want to note that I know that there has been more work done since our last field assessments, which were in August of 2023. And just wanted to acknowledge and highlight some of the great work that's already being done. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about LakeWise, which is a program, if you're not familiar, through the Vermont DEC to promote lake-friendly living. So those are areas where we aren't having a negative impact on the lake by, having a residence or another development along the lakeshore because of practices and management strategies that you've put into place. So what the LakeWise program does is assess for key areas of each property. So those areas are the driveway, structure, and septic. So that would be, for example, a house in terms of the structure, a recreation area, and the shoreline itself. So during this plan, we worked with the Shadow Lake Association to do some outreach to some landowners that were prioritized through that lakeshore assessment that I talked about near the beginning. And we completed 5 of those assessments along the lakeshore. And overall, we had 80% of them, so 4 of the 5 passed the driveway portion, 60% passed the structures and septic portion, 40% passed the recreation portion, and 0 passed the shoreline portion. So that's not entirely surprising because these areas were targeted because they potentially could use some improvements, and these residents were motivated to do something on their property to improve the potential water quality impacts of their property. And it's nice to see that folks are willing to participate in the program. And I would also like to make sure to note that this is a free program. There's no regulatory implications for it. It's really meant to help people to understand the best way that they can live in harmony with their the lake that they clearly enjoy if they live on it. And I would encourage more folks to work with the Shadow Lake Association, NRCD, and Vermont DEC to complete more of these assessments. And I know there were some folks who were interested, but the timelines unfortunately just didn't line up for this project, but hopefully those will be completed during this next field season. So I just wanted to sum up all of that. And I know that was a lot of information, but in general, wanted to call out some of the water quality stressors that we identified during the plan. And again, pull back to that initial overview slide where we looked at the proportion of priority sites by those 3 sectors that we're looking at. So I'm going to go through some of the recommendations. This is not an exhaustive list from the plan because there are a lot of them. But if you'd like to read all of them, you can definitely do that in the plan itself or in that story map document. So first, we'd like to further develop and implement a lot of these practices that were identified and take a look at some road segments again, because there have been a lot of changes in the watershed, particularly with large storm events and the removal of the pavement on Shadow Lake Road. And I think it's really important that we think about building resiliency when we do these sort of road projects, so that when large storms happen in the future, there isn't a significant amount of damage. So just a few examples here. On the top right, we have what are known as check dams, which are essentially piles of rock that you can put in a ditch to slow down water and accumulate a lot of the sediment there so that it could be removed. We have stone-lined ditches with clear culverts, and then grass-lined ditches as well. So making sure to stabilize our ditches and ensure that they're maintained regularly is key. Also preserving and protecting our large undeveloped parcels within the watershed. So Shadow Lake is in a good position because even though, yes, we do have increasing phosphorus trends in the lake, it is in a very good condition still. And I think in part that's due to the lack of complete development within the watershed and having these vegetated upland areas within the watershed that still do perform those important things that we were talking about at the beginning, slowing down stormwater and letting it sink into the ground and filtering it. And also completing some additional stream assessments, because as I mentioned, this was the phase 1 of the Lake Watershed Action Plan. So stream walks were not within the scope of this study, but there were a few in particular tributaries that had high nutrient loads, which was determined through the water quality sampling that's completed through the LaRosa program. So really understanding, where those inputs are coming from that's an important thing to do. Stabilizing trails and preventing future damage from ATVs. And this is particularly important in areas where there are wetlands or streams. Working with the DEC, Shadow Lake Association, and the NRCD to do those additional lake-wise assessments, and then potentially getting help to implement those specific recommendations. And then working with the NRCD, other local partners, and private landowners to improve those lake and stream buffers. So just a few examples of some lake buffers that are nice and robust, but also fairly aesthetically pleasing. Completing an illicit discharge survey to identify and eliminate potential sources of contamination. So things like leaking septic systems, that can be a major concern. And that illicit discharge survey is a great way to systematically identify and eliminate those sources. Encouraging adoption of residential green stormwater infrastructure. So that's things like rain gardens, rain barrels, vegetated buffers, these small, fairly easy to implement practices that residents can do on their own property that collectively can make a really big difference in the watershed. And then working with the Vermont DEC Stream Flow Protection Program and staff and Stream Flow Protection Coordinator and river ecologist to improve the dam functionality and reduce hazards. I know this is an issue of major concern in the watershed. It's not a focus of this plan specifically, except as it relates to higher water levels, which can lead to instability along the lake shore, but it is an important thing to note. And that's all I have in the overview presentation. If I have another second here, let me switch screens. Want to show the story map to people just to give a little introduction there. Can folks see my story map now, hopefully.
Looks
Yes.
good.
And just so folks know, I did put a link to the story map in the chat if people want to go there.
Great, thank you. So the story map is really, and it functions like a website. So when you get here, you have all these links at the top, so you can jump around to particular areas of interest for you. But it has more information than what I was able to tell you in this brief presentation. But hopefully it's a little bit more user-friendly than the full report. And each one of these maps you can click on and zoom around and explore. Let me just go down to one with some data in it. And I'll show you, you can click on each one of these areas that are identified and just read a little bit about each one of those locations if that's something of interest to you. So there's a lot of information on there. I'm not going to go through it all again because we just did that. But I did want to just make sure everyone knows that that is there, and you can explore it at your leisure.
I also put a link to the chat to the Conservation District website that we have, or webpage specifically for the Shadow Lake LWAP resources, that includes a link to the story map. So if you're ever like, where did it go? You can go to the Conservation District's website and find your way around to get to that link in the future if you need it again, if you lose it or whatever, it's hosted there.
That's great.
So
thanks.
Yeah. So I think we can move into question and answers for Carrie. And if folks just want to raise their hand, I'm going to call on Jack and then I'll call on Sarah.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jack Sundberg. I live up on Shadow Lake Road, up almost to Daniels Pond, so I'm in the watershed. I was also on the Glover Select Board for 9 years, ending about 3 years ago. And during that time was very involved with the dam at Shadow Lake, as well as the roads. But I met with, every time the Vermont Dam Safety Engineers came to Shadow Lake to inspect the dam, I met with them, talked with them, talked with the engineers at Du Bois and King when they were working on assessing the dam, and also worked with other Glover Historical Society members on the history of Slab City, which is the little industrial settlement that used to be at the outlet of the lake, and that grew up because there was a dam there. And so I want to respond a little bit to the statement that Carrie made when she started the shoreline erosion discussion. She said that the dam that isn't functioning as it was designed. And there's been a lot of misunderstanding about this over the years. So I just want to bring it up one more time. So that dam probably goes back to the 1820s as a wooden dam built there to hold water in the lake, probably to raise the lake level actually originally. And then let the sawmills, the potato starch mill, the box factory, everything else that was there over many years, use that water to power the mills. And when the present granite and earthen dam was built, which was around 1900, there was still one sawmill operating on the outlet stream down, not right at the lake, but down almost to Route 16, at the bottom of the stream, just before it goes into the Barton River. There was a sawmill down there called the Lawrence Mill. And the owner of that mill owned the Shadow Lake Dam and owned the rights to the water power. And the pipe, the main outlet in the dam is just a 36-inch diameter pipe. And it has an iron gate on it that can be lowered. And what we learned studying the history of that area was that they used to come up at the end of the workday and close that gate because they didn't want to waste any water overnight when they weren't sawing. and they'd go back up in the morning and open the gate and let the water run again in the stream. Of course, that's nothing that would be allowed to be done today, but this was, 100 years ago. And the auxiliary spillway, which is about 18 inches above the normal summer height of the lake level now, that has provision in it to add stop logs in so that you could even hold water above the height of the auxiliary spillway. So this was at a time when only the first few camps were built, on the far end of the lake. Probably nobody imagined that there would be camps, that the development would be like it is today. And the lake was mainly used for its water power, not for recreational purposes. It's true that the dam isn't functioning as it was designed. We don't shut the gate anymore to hold water in the lake, and we don't add boards in the auxiliary spillway. But when people make that statement, it sounds like there are ways that a freer flow of water could be going out of that dam, and the lake level would not rise so much when we have snow melt or rain events. If we have one big rain event, if we have several wet weeks, it's a big watershed. A lot of streams flow into that lake. Everything that comes into Daniels Pond flows in, and there's only one way it can go out, and that is a 36-inch pipe. So there's no way and then once the water rises 18 inches above the usual summer level, then it starts to flow out the auxiliary spillway. But that's just a 12-foot wide spillway. There may be 6 inches of water flowing over it. It's according to the engineers, it's just not a lot of water. So even the two of those, the 36-inch pipe and the 12-foot spillway, can never keep up when the water's really flowing into the lake. It also just takes time for the water to get down out of the woods, into the streams, into the lake, and then to get from one end of the lake to the other. The engineers told me that when the water's coming in fast, the lake level would actually be higher at the far end of the lake than it would be at the dam. And it takes time for that water to move down the lake. I asked the engineers, I asked the Boise and King engineers, if that dam was changed so that it was a 100-foot wide spillway that was all at the same height as the desired summer level of the lake, would that let water out of the lake fast enough so that you wouldn't have a lake rise? And they said, well, it would let it out a little faster, but you would still have rise in water level, even with a spillway that wide and that low, that there's just, because of the size of the watershed, because of how much water can come in a fast melt or a big storm. So I just think it's important to keep in mind and this is true of any lake, there's always more water coming in than can go out, unless you have multiple exits and only one inlet, which would be a very unusual lake, probably be a dry lake. It's just part of the natural system that when you get a lot of precipitation, you get a lot of snow melt, but lake water is going to rise. And it's not, and the dam stays fully open at all times. It's not about the way the dam is operated. So I just wanted to say that one more time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack. So I know that this could turn into a large dam discussion. So I'm going to actually move to Sarah Gluckman had a question. So I'm going to move to that. And then if somebody wants to respond to the dam, I might limit it to a little bit. I just don't want the last half hour to just be focused on the dam. But if that's where the energy's at, of course, I wanted to support that also. So Sarah.
I wanted to ask where exactly I can find copies or the description of each of the 30 projects that Carrie is the group is recommending. I tried it this afternoon and I never got to a spot where I could actually see each individual page of those 30 recommendations.
So Carrie, I think that's the appendix. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So Sarah, I
in
haven't.
the whole final report.
Yeah, and so that has not been shared yet. That's something that I want to work with Jen, just because there are specific landowners there. I do want to try to give people the heads up before, the public has information about their properties being prioritized, just to respect folks that way. So that should be up very soon. Our grant, actually, our final report has to be done by the end of the month. So Jen, that's something that you and I and Carrie and maybe Sarah, whoever, sort of on the internal stakeholders, we need to strategize about that, because I just want to be respectful for folks, as folks are, prioritized there, so that they're not sort of sideswiped by that.
So right now you can't see those 30 projects.
So right now we don't have the appendix up on the web, right?
Okay. Oh,
Yep.
then that's why I couldn't find it.
Right, sorry, yep. Good question. Okay, next. Anybody else have questions, comments? Great. Mike, do you have any thoughts that you want to share? Oh,
No,
okay.
other than we have completed a lot of projects along the lake.
That's great. David?
Well, and I don't want to get into a dam discussion tonight, but the last engineering report that we received showed that the 36-inch valve was only 60% open and only capable of opening 60%. It showed that the debris rack was only allowing 50% of the outflow. And I actually saw at least an 8-inch waterfall going over the debris that was in front of the rack. And we had 3 alternatives drawn up by Du Bois and King that showed that we could at least lower the 41-day water retention to somewhere near a 10 or 15-day event instead of 40 days. And that's all I have to say.
Steve?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to say a couple things about the dam myself. David is correct. The valve only opens up 60%, so there's a 40% obstruction. To correct, I wasn't privy to the conversation that Jack had with Du Bois and King, so I can't comment on that. Other than I would like to make a correction to him that the spillway is 15 foot wide. I'd also like to say that David is correct that the debris rack does obstruct that. And the 36-inch valve is the only exit of the water unless the water comes up 19.2 inches. And there is studies that show in the recent H&H reports that a reduction in time that David speaks about can be achieved. And that's very important to the shoreline in itself. I mean, we can do all the plantings we want to save the shoreline, but if they're super saturated in sog and don't live, those plantings, essentially are a futile attempt. So I don't want to get long-winded about the dam, other than, it is to be said that of 5.3 square miles of watershed, that it all exits through one 36-inch diameter pipe, which is presently deficient and not fully opened.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Jack? Oh, Jack, your mic is off here. I can try to unmute him.
I agree completely that the trash rack could be improved, that the gate could open farther, that more water would flow out of the pipe if that was done. My point was just that the dam was built to hold water, not to let it out fast. It could work better, I agree. That would shorten the time that the lake is high, I agree, but you still don't have fluctuations in the lake level. That's just the way it is. So I don't argue with and 12 feet, 15 feet, that's fine. And 19.2 inches instead of 18, that's fine too. But it could work better. It could work better, but water's always going to what lake level will change when there's a lot of precipitation or snow melt.
Thanks. Steve, do you still have a question, or is your hand raised still? Comment?
No, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Put my hand down.
That's all right. All right. Let's see. So I'm going to share my screen, and just, if people still have questions, feel free to raise your hand still. So just want to share a little bit about the next steps. We can support the town and interested landowners in the adoption of the plan and water quality projects. And then, of course, the Shadow Lake Association can be involved in, facilitating that work as well. That can look like doing assessments in project development for anybody who is interested in the lake-wise or stream-wise assessments. Right now, like a lot of things, it's about kind of capacity. And right now, the capacity to do those lake-wise assessments is with DEC. So if anybody's interested, you can get in touch with Jen or anybody at the Lake Association, and then they can facilitate you getting access to DEC Allison Marchioni, who is the staff person at DEC who leads the Lake-wise program. And then, of course, the Conservation District too, we can help facilitate that happening. And then if projects kind of start to come together, there are a variety of funding sources for folks who might need some design work or some supporting funds to do that implementation work. And so the next slide, I just have this diagram here that kind of shows the different phases of projects. So depending on the complexity of the project, we can support getting funds to do project development work. And there could be a scenario where a project development grant is pulled together on behalf of a variety of different landowners who might be interested. And that way it could help support the capacity of somebody working on a variety of projects. So project development can look that way, or it can look very specific about one specific project. And then there is money for design. Depending on the complexity, it can either be 30% design or 100% design. And then depending again on the complexity, you sometimes don't need to do a 30% design. You can get 100% design and implementation funds in one particular grant. And then depending on the funding source, there is some operation and maintenance work that is required. So down below is just a list of the variety of funding sources. Up at the top is the Clean Water Service Provider. So in the Memphremagog watershed, the Clean Water Service Provider is VHCB, and entities can apply to VHCB. It's a funding source that's really geared toward reduction of pounds of phosphorus and reaching certain efficiencies on that pounds of phosphorus. The districts are entities that apply to those clean water service providers, but towns can also apply. So like if you have a project that you just have a shortfall of X amount of dollars and you think it's a good sediment reduction project, you can definitely let me know and I can help you facilitate that way. And maybe Teresa could help you access some of those funds or whatever. And then also those formula grants can be, ideally for, high efficiency reduction projects, but then also, like the state access area there would be potentially a good fit depending on the sediment reduction outputs there. And then there are some other block grants that are available for projects that aren't necessarily reaching those phosphorus efficiencies. And then there's some funding specifically for riparian buffers, and then the conservation districts through our Trees for Streams program. And then any areas that have ag activity can have access to the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. So there's lots of programs available, and the district can definitely help folks navigate, the right way to get the right spot and help you identify the right person to get in touch with and whatever it is you need that way. So that's just a brief outline of that for you. And then I just wanted to share quickly, Carrie did talk some about the Vermont Bioengineering Manual and showed some clips from that. And so I'm going to share these slides on that district webpage, so you can go back here again, or you can just remember, if you Google the Vermont Bioengineering Manual, it's actually really user-friendly and has a lot of great information. Sharing the Edge is something specific for lakeshore property owners. Again, really great resource, and really good to share with contractors and folks that are, doing business along the lake shore. And then similarly, like I talked about earlier, the Natural Lake Shoreland Erosion and Control Certification course that Allison manages and delivers is a great way for folks in the industry to attend that and learn about what is a core log, and what are all of these different practices, infiltration steps, all of those kind of things that actually might be interesting for you if you're interested in that at some point. I went to it. It was really good. So just wanted to share those resources. And then I'm just gonna send it back to Jen. And then Jen, if you want to just talk a little bit about the Shadow Lake Association, and then maybe I'll scoot over and put a survey in the chat for folks.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank everybody who's had a hand in the preparation of this ginormous document, from the past DEC Lakes and Ponds Director, Oliver Pearson, who was initially instrumental in getting this off the ground, and who introduced this idea first to the board. Also, a big thank you to Sarah Damsel, of the Orleans County Conservation District, who is just an organizer extraordinaire, as well as an unbelievably great resource. Also to Carrie Garvey from Watershed Consulting, who did the lion's share of compiling so much data for this report. And also to the many scientists who continue to contribute data to keep track of lake health in Vermont. That also means the regular old people who are around Shadow Lake are gathering data, water samples to collect data for the scientists to review and compile. I think also really critical to recognize is the Shadow Lake Association members, the Shadow Lake community, and the Shadow Lake landowners who have participated in assisting all of those professionals. Not to be overlooked are those who have already participated in the LakeWise program and who have encouraged others to follow suit as they see their projects being assessed and then coming to fruition. It's incredibly important to encourage others. The data collection and then this subsequent report informs us of very important work that must be done around the lake to keep it healthy. So to that end, everyone who lives on, near, and around Shadow Lake and in its watershed must stay interested and engaged in this work. So I compel all of our lakeshore owners to reach out to a board member with questions and comments about LakeWise, this report, and other things. We always use volunteers collecting water samples. Please stay informed. All of this information will get put on our brand new website that is much easier to use. Also, things that will be in social media encouraging people to become informed. And finally, but most importantly, I think, is to participate. And please encourage others to do the same. because this is the work. It's important for us to maintain the health of Shadow Lake. It's an economic driver to the town. It's something that we all enjoy. So take this report to heart, and please make sure to sign up for Lakewise Association assessments, which are free, that are done, as Sarah said, by Allison Marcioni, who is just right on, clear, astute person who will be able to really just give you what you need to know to improve the runoff or retention of runoff. So thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate your attendance here.
Perfect. Thank you, Jen. And I did put a screenshot up here of the new Lake Association webpage, and then they have a space here to sign up for their newsletter. So if you want to do that too. So then here's our last slide, just ways to get in touch. So I actually will put a copy of the link of these slides in the chat, and then so that you can have that contact information and just have the whole slideshow. But like I said, I will also put it on the web on our Shadow Lake page. And then finally, to help inform this overall Lake Watershed Action Planning process, and to get some feedback from you all, because, you know, the DEC is doing these around the state, multiple conservation districts are doing these, and other watershed groups. I have 3 questions that I would love for you to answer in this survey. So if you just click that link, you should get into that survey, and you should be able to fill it out. If you run into any issues, please let me know. And then after that, if folks want to continue to chat, please do. But that is sort of the end of our presentation here. And thank you so much for attending. And thank you, everybody, for all your energy and just getting this plan together. And like Jen said, I think it's going to be a lot of really good work ahead, and a nice document to guide our work together. So yeah, and thanks for letting me be in your office here. Okay, any troubles getting access to the survey? Okay, great. Okay.